1, 2, 3, 4.
News,
culture, astronomy,
physics,
humanities,
space,
science, travel,
Boom! Knowledge! Boom! Knowledge!
history,
humor,
technology,
Games.
business.
music.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are on Ms. Planet number 3. And welcome to Boom Knowledge, a podcast furiously dedicated to amazing facts, figures, and information about, well, all the topics mentioned in that opening music and much, much more. I'm your host, Mike Vass, and it's great to have you here. Welcome to the show. If you're a video game fan in particular, well, I have a real treat in store this episode. And if you're not, well, I think you'll find more than a few things to like anyway. I have landed yet another exceptional guest in my ongoing quest to learn things, not just on my own, but with the help of other very fine humans. And this one's name is Mario de Govia, a former writer and leader over at Prima Games and a producer on the hit mobile game Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. He and I have a lot of ground to cover, so let's just cut to the goods post-haste. Ahead in gaming knowledge. Okay, well, I have Mario de Govia here with me. Hi, Mario. Good to have you.
Hi, Mike. Good to be here.
And I think my listeners are going to start to believe maybe that I might have begun this podcast just so I would have an opportunity to talk to my friends, because you and I have been friends for some time, but it absolutely just happens to work out that I know incredibly interesting, smart, creative people that are perfect for a show like Boom Knowledge. So
your plan is coming together.
It's my nefarious plans. And of course, we know each other. Actually, I'm staying with my parents right now, and my folks know you as the guy in the horns that married me.
Yeah, well, I married you, I married my mom, I married my sister.
We may want to change our phrasing a little bit, I'm suddenly realizing.
No, I think that's good.
Yeah, just leave it alone?
Yeah, we'll just keep it there.
So people have a little bit of background. Some years ago, I got married, and the officiant at my wedding, which was a Halloween-themed affair, was Mario. Thanks for doing that, Mario. And I think you did a fabulous job because, in fact, I was married for a good long time. And the greater percentage of that was really awesome. So strong work.
Why, thank you.
So let's get into a little bit about you. I'm excited to have you on the show because you and I share, well, I don't know if it's a passion for you anymore because you've been in the industry for a time. But certainly you have a background in games and game creation and some time in writing about games in general and different facets, and we'll talk about that. And I thought maybe we could just start by getting into some of your background, beginning with Prima Games, who some folks will know as a company that has been around for a very long time, making game guides.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, like you say, we grew up with it. I have a distinct memory of being in Italy with my family and finding a Space Invaders game, and that's really where all of that started. But I started with Prima Games back in 1998 as an editor, so I would edit the game guides there. And I think my proudest achievement as an editor is for one of the original fighting games that had, let's say, a chest physics element to it. My cell line for the back of the book was more bounce per ounce.
That's awesome.
That's pretty much all that was notable of my editing career, because really I'm not that good at editing. But moved into writing the game guides, was a head writer for their in-house team for about 5 years. 5 years. And then got bumped into managing the guides for another 6 years. So I think I've done over 200 guides. I've had some hand in over 200 strategy guides.
Wow, I had no idea that you were that prolific when you were doing that work.
Prima really churned them out. Like we were no slouches. And over the course of just the 5 years of writing, I did an estimate. I've written over 1 million words in strategy guides.
Wow.
And if we had been allowed onto the New York Times bestseller, Donkey Kong Country would have been a #1 seller when it came out.
Just flew off the shelves. Now, I played that game. In fact, I remember quite well because I had just had an accident when that game was released, and I put my arm through a window, which, by the way, if you're a guitarist or really a human being, I don't recommend doing that. That's a big skip in life. But in any case, I remember that game very well because that's how I learned to play games one-handed.
Oh, wow. That's something.
Yeah, which is not a skill that you think you're going to need in life, but there you go.
There it is.
Well, I'd love. Oh, go ahead.
Just saying, me and the writing team there, and pretty much any strategy guide writer are some of the best-selling writers that no one ever knows. Those games, those guides, they're on the shelf for 3 months, and then they just don't sell anymore.
Right. I've been patting myself on the back because I've been cranking out somewhere between, 6 and 12,000 words per week in writing this podcast. And now I realize I'm a chump. That is nothing.
Let's just say that if you can figure out more than 3 ways of saying open the door or shoot the enemy, you've got a great career in front of you as a strategy guide writer.
So that's awesome. I'd love to understand maybe a little bit about what the process was for you guys, because I imagine certainly there's no shortage of actually playing the game, but you also would, I'm guessing, partner up with the publisher and the team to get more information so that you're not going in blind. Can you talk a little bit about what that looked like for you guys?
Sure thing. So there were actually a couple of different levels of how that would work out. It really depended on the developer and how much resources they would give us. Sometimes they would actually have someone that we could contact directly, usually on the QA team. And they, depending on how good they were at documentation, sometimes we'd get full lists of, what are the hidden items, what are the moves, that kind of thing.
Right. And for folks that aren't familiar, QA stands for quality assurance. And those are the guys that are spending hours and hours of their lives trying to find all the bugs and get them to the development team and get those fixed.
Yeah, they're the ones who make sure that basically without them, you'd have so many more weird body contortion bugs coming through that you see YouTube videos of.
Right. That some companies would call Easter eggs rather than bugs.
Yeah. It's a feature.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was like gold standard. Oh my gosh, these guys are so great to us. And then there were companies who we would get an early version of the game, sometimes even before alpha or beta. And the process there is there would be just sort of raw code, alpha version of the game, which is really early on, beta, which is a little closer to launch. And then there's the gold master, as the terminology some of them used, or the final, and then that's what goes out to the public. So sometimes we'd get pre-alpha builds and almost nothing else, and have to work from there. Sometimes we'd get better versions of the game, but absolutely no support otherwise. So it would be on us to find all the hidden things, to draw all the maps.
And you're actually working in conjunction with the development teams, still making the game so that you can try to tie the guide as close as you can to a release date, right?
Yeah, I did work on a couple of MMOs during my time there, and pretty much in every case, the guide was obsolete as soon as it hit the shelves because they would just immediately do a patch that would it would mess up our guide. It would make their game probably better.
Right, demonstrably better in some cases.
And then, there would be a process where we would play through the game. And at the time, our sort of video recording and screenshot tech wasn't the best. So we would have to play through, maybe twice to get all the writing done, 2 to 3 times. Then we'd have to do another playthrough to get the screenshots, because we would essentially not know what we needed to screenshot until after we'd gone through most of it. And there's sometimes some really Herculean efforts to set up exactly the right screenshot.
Yeah, I could imagine.
And then usually there would be another playthrough that was specifically so we could draw the maps. And that could be just grueling. Sometimes it was one guy, and that was all he did for the entire process. And that process of writing could take anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 weeks. I think my proudest achievement was the last guide I wrote was for Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. I did it by myself in 9 days.
Oh,
and
that sounds intense.
There was a sleeping bag under all of our desks, and we spent many nights at the office.
Yeah, I've had that experience. I think my listeners have probably heard me talk about working at startup companies and under intense deadlines. You and I both will talk about this when we get into your current background, but we've both been through development releases, and no shortage of experience in terms of sleeping under desks and eating Snickers bars or whatever happens to be closest, so you don't, perish from hunger and so forth.
Yeah, it's you better like the people you're working with, or you better like them at the beginning because you're going to hate them at the end.
Right. So in terms of your general Prima experience, it sounds pretty stressful for one to me. Did you enjoy the gig overall?
Overall, yeah. Given some distance, it always gets rosier. But yeah, it was really, really interesting to be that steeped in the video game industry, because people in video game development, they work on, especially in those days, they would work on one game for years. That was what they did. As part of the Prima, like I said, I worked on 200 guides overall over the course of 12 years, and so even the guys I didn't work on, I was aware of all the games, and I was working with every major video game developer at the time throughout that entire time period.
Sounds like that would keep things really fresh and interesting for that decade plus.
Yeah, it was, and it really gave me a sense of sort of how games evolved, what the new trends were, and to see what worked and what didn't. And generally just had this interesting, holistic view of what was out there in the market.
Now, it's interesting that you say that you got a sense for what worked and what didn't, because you parlayed that into a career shift, a pretty big one.
Yeah, I did it kind of in the stupidest way possible, though, is after all of my experience with console games and PC games and top tier like AAA titles and just being right there at the top of it, I decided then to go into the development of Facebook games, which were tiny and free to play.
Right, which you probably didn't have really any experience in before, if I recall. I mean, you and I had a few conversations at that time, and that was really an emerging market when you got involved.
It was, so what happened is, so Prima Games is in Roseville, a suburb of Sacramento, California. And I decided I should leave print publishing and get into something a little more digital.
How incredibly prescient of you.
Yeah, just started to see the writing on the wall, and realized, okay, I've got all this experience in the industry as a parasite, so how can I become host body? And managed to literally stumble across a startup Facebook game company in Sacramento, in downtown Sacramento. My wife and I had been out to have dinner, and there was definitely some drinks involved. And we saw this building that had previously housed the local, independent newspaper, and they had a standee of a superhero in it. And they were also open at 7 o'clock at night. The door was just open, and I just walked in and was like, "What do you guys do here?" And I got a card from someone who looked a little baffled as to why I had walked in, and I started checking out their Facebook game, Superhero City, and that led me to put in a resume at Click Nation. That was a couple Facebook games that I became the producer on. So that was Superhero City and Age of Champions.
And, those games did pretty good, didn't they? Just in general.
For definitely for the size and of the startup, they were both very successful. They kept the lights on for sure for many years at their offices, and pulled in a lot of very devoted players, and was really they were based on the Mafia Wars model, and very roughed versions of monetization and free to play. The ones that are, I'm sure some people look back on it at fondness, but there was also a lot of vitriol around this new sort of form of playing video games and servicing players. But we did well enough that we caught the attention of EA BioWare, and we got purchased by them. Actually, only about a year after I had joined the company.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question before we get into your EA background. And things just get more fabulous as they go along here for you, which I love, and you totally deserve it. But I think you shared with me at the time when you were working on these Facebook games a little of sort of the human psychology element associated with microtransactions, and people sometimes spending these incredible amounts of money on their virtual avatar, essentially. And I wonder if if you remember exactly, top users and kind of what they were money that they were throwing down on these social media games that don't mean a lot in the real world, really.
And not to reveal finances or anything, but there are players out there who are spending. There were many zeros after their totals that they were spending on these games.
Perfect. Would not want to get in the way of you in an NDA with that question, but many zeros says a lot.
And the thing is they call them social games, and they called them social games, and that's not a bad way to describe them. We had very, very active forums, and these players could band together in their guilds, and in very much the same way you saw it in MMOs, Warcraft, and all the ones that said they were going to beat Warcraft, that people would get very, very sort of loyal to each other, and also very invested in their character. And it was the same thing that we saw here. And I think there was something about the fact that it was a sort of a smaller pond. And similar to what we see with mobile, it wasn't there wasn't a whole lot of twitch or motor skills that you necessarily needed to be good at it. You could there was a lot of auto resolve battle, and so battle wasn't. And actually, this is something about most mobile games anyway. Battle isn't the game. The game isn't about the actual fight. It really is about managing your character or characters, progressing them in a way that will help you have success in the battle. And then the battle is really where you test your theories and test the work that you've been doing to create these characters and to sort of power yourself up. And so that appeals to a broad spectrum of people. And in a way, it's also a spectrum of people that weren't necessarily served by an MMO or by a first-person shooter.
I was going to say, or a shooter or a Twitch type of game, or a racing game, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that genre too has, people may or may not know this, but has some, I think, rich tradition going all the way back to modem days, when people would play social games that were turn-based. And of course,
Yeah.
that led to Mafia Wars and some others. But you're right, that does serve a whole cross-section of folks that might not be interested in some of the blockbuster game types and has become a more ubiquitous art form.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really does. I think Facebook led the way for this, but mobile has definitely picked up the ball and run with it. Is that it serves a whole new population of gamers, people who, and I know there's a lot of talk of this a year or 4 ago about who is a gamer, and really, it's just anyone who plays the games. And the fact that mobile, and at the time Facebook, was offering things that gamers of all stripes and of all speeds, at all paces, and at all sort of experience levels really opened that up so that people could find things that really, scratched the itch.
Yeah, for sure. And the demographics have just really exploded outward.
For
Games aren't for geeks anymore.
Geeks have taken over the world.
Just geeks. Well, yeah, I guess that is becoming almost an irrelevant term in the modern world as well. So let's move on to your mobile gaming experience and what you're doing. You'd mentioned that EA BioWare gobbled up the previous company that you were working for. What did that lead to?
Yeah, so they picked us up. We had success in Facebook and specifically in sort of CCG RPG. So that's card collecting game, role playing game, card collecting game. Basically, think of it as your cards are stats that you can stack onto your player, or to your characters. That's sort of the idea behind it. So you get more cards, you get more power. That's like the real boiled down version of it. And EA kind of, I think, saw that this was a fertile ground and picked us up because we had some experience there. But at about the same time, as some people weren't surprised by the fact that Facebook gaming was starting to wane, and you can see how mobile has completely taken over from what used to be almost exclusively a Facebook portal. And so we pivoted into mobile and took that kind of knowledge that we had with free to play into the mobile realm and started down that path. So the studio, which is currently named Capital Games, put out Supreme Heroes first, which was our foray into mobile. It was Superhero City for mobile, but we did a pretty drastic redesign. Didn't do what we wanted it to financially, but it definitely taught us a lot about the sphere. That was followed by Heroes of Dragon Age, and then by Galaxy of Heroes, the Star Wars game that's currently out there.
Which is doing phenomenally well. And I will add, is also very highly reviewed and highly regarded and highly reviewed. And congratulations for that. That is something that all studios aspire to and not every studio hits.
Yeah, thanks. I still play it daily. In fact, many times during the day. And I'm currently not attached directly to Capital Games, so I still work with Galaxy of Heroes. I'm more central at EA, but yeah, it has not stopped me from playing that game every single day.
That's great. And how's it been? You and I are roughly the same age and obviously grew up with Star Wars as part of our lore, part of what shaped us as kids. And how's it been working in the Star Wars universe as an adult?
It's been a hell of a ride. It's amazing to think that we are able to play with that IP, but also to be able to add to it. Not that we're not telling stories necessarily in it, but the fact that when people think of Star Wars, Galaxy of Heroes is in the conversation, and that's just astonishing. Like kind of blown away by it. And it's something that it sometimes takes an effort to step away from the fact that I'm doing a job to see that. I think I told you a couple weeks ago how listening to your history of video games, for something about hearing the sort of step by step through the world of video games, each one of which I remembered, because again, we're kind of the same age.
Yep.
Each one of us, each step I remembered as a memory of my childhood, and so it really sort of built up through the course of those two episodes to this point where I can't remember what it was you were talking about, but it washed over me all of a sudden that, holy crap, I work in video games. I can't believe I work in video games. This is amazing. And so it every now and then I get those flashes of, whoa, this is super fun.
Yeah, take a step back and look around and like, oh my goodness, how did I get here? I absolutely love that. And you're right. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just say, and then I look at my business calendar for the week and get back down to
Yeah, that's right. Because one of the things, so I'll say one thing about what you just said. By the way, thank you for mentioning that episode and listening to it. That's sweet of you.
Everybody listening, go back, make sure you've heard those. They're great.
Thanks. And those are markers of our life. You're absolutely right. And I thought about the same thing when I was producing that episode. I also have this phenomena that if I'm trying to remember, a particular thing that happened in my life and triangulate it to a year, I can either look up the date of a video game or I can look up the date of a movie and be able to figure out based on that, that happened in 1987.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, the other thing to talk personal, my father is a production designer. And so he's worked on a bunch of movies, and that's exactly how I mark lots of sort of points of my life is, oh yeah, that was the year of Red Dawn. Oh yeah, that was the year of Remo Williams. And I have actually gone to the DVD case of Red Dawn to see like, okay, yeah, that was released in 84. So that Christmas in, Las Vegas, New Mexico was 83.
Right. You were actually on set for some of those as well, correct?
Yeah, we were on location with my dad on several of them. I walked through the Nakatomi offices.
Oh, that is, wow. If it were me, I might put that, if not on a tombstone, that would certainly be like a headline of a memoir. That is phenomenal.
Mario de Govia, devoted husband, video game professional, walked on the set of the
Nakatomi offices. Exactly. So I can't remember where I was going to go next, but I will ask. The Nakatomi thing just totally threw me off.
Yeah.
Do you still play games at all? I mean, obviously, you mentioned you're still playing your Star Wars game and enjoying that. But after all of those years of playing, and I asked that question, I've asked this of a number of friends who I've known in the past that have worked in the gaming industry and have gotten varied responses. Everything from occasionally to I'm still an enthusiast to if I never see another video game again, it'll be too soon. Where do you sit on that spectrum?
Let's see. I mean, when I was with Prima, I played constantly. I used to joke that if I had been allowed to keep my gamer score when I was writing guides, I would have basically launched the Xbox, the gamer score system ahead of everybody in the world. But it has definitely petered out in terms of the time that I spend. And when I do spend time playing, it's very focused on a specific franchise that I really love. I have over 1,600 hours on Team Fortress 2. I've replayed the Portal games several times. Any time a Fallout game comes out, I buy a new PC system and finish it. Like I have finished Fallout 4 and all of the DLC.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. Or the Mass Effect games. I mean, and that's actually kind of a good touch point is, Andromeda. I'm not sure
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And I'm not sure when I'm going to get to it, but I will, but it might be a year later. Most of my time is really spent with mobile games right now. And I play there are several that I play routinely because they just caught me when I was researching them. There are like 3 or 4 of those. And then I try to keep up with new releases, especially ones that are close to games I'm working on or working with, so that I understand, what they're doing and what innovations they've come up with.
Yeah, I can't believe that didn't even occur to me, but now that you've said it, it's so obvious. You want to pay attention to the marketplace and see what others are doing and how they're innovating, and not to ape what they're doing, although there's certainly no shortage of that in the video game industry, but just to keep yourself fresh.
Yeah, you have to. It's a truism. You said about aping each other. You do see very similar games, and Galaxy of Heroes has DNA from other games that came before it. Not least of which is the games that the studio did beforehand as well, because there's often it's scary and sometimes very inefficient to innovate wholly. Like if you're starting from the ground and saying, I'm going to make something entirely new, that is extraordinarily risky. And it's also, there's no body of work behind it. But if you find a new way to show battle in a card collection game, that's really exciting. And that's something that, can be sort of looked and admired and can garner a lot of success. Or if you have sometimes even just a new way of trading, let's say, in a card, something like that, or you have a new economy. Like there's different rates of exchange within your game. Like how much time you put in gets you different amounts of currency, say, than another game that was very popular. Those kind of things are very important, and I think it's very important to understand as a developer that the things that work for a reason, and researching other games and playing other games and really thinking about them is a way to understand why those things work. It's right. The same thing it's the same thing with any creative endeavor, everything from painting to movies to music.
Yeah. There's a good reason that the hero's journey works and has worked for by way of a writing example, has worked for centuries because it just works. It's exactly. A great formula.
And knowing those formulas allows you to innovate off of those formulas, or it's that old saw of you have to understand the rules before you can break them. So I know there are players I've had conversations with back in the Facebook game days where essentially what it boiled down to was, why aren't you giving us things faster? Like why aren't we able to earn things faster? And if they were going to make a game, they would change it so that everybody got everything a lot quicker. And the realization from sort of running the games and designing those games and sometimes trying things like that was, sometimes the things that the players think they want would kill the game itself. And then this thing that those players genuinely love, would go away because it would be unsustainable, or it would literally be no fun anymore. And it's hard to recognize that sometimes when you're playing it, or you're playing one thing and you're not seeing what else is going on in the sphere. So
I think there's this beautiful balance in truly brilliant game design of incorporating player feedback, looking at data, understanding the marketplace, understanding your mechanics, being innovative. I mean, there's all these things that go into it. And certainly if you get any one of those levers wrong, or you go too far in one direction, it can throw everything else out of whack and you don't have the game that you ultimately want to make. I think it's really, people should be, we know that gamers can be some of the loudest complainers in the world too. And it would be great if the game community could recognize just what talent it takes to get these things right.
Yeah. And I can't remember the writer, and I really should have this article bookmarked, but there was a game reviewer who then became a game developer and within the past year, I think wrote an article saying, essentially, I think the title was, "I was a game reviewer, I became a game developer, and I am so sorry."
Yeah.
And
Totally.
he really hit a lot of the high points of, what the complaints are that players make and why those things exist, like why those sore points exist. And sometimes it's like what I said, which is, it would kill the game to sort of do it the way that a player would want, says they want it to be done. And sometimes it's just, the exigencies of life and the lack of resources, or they have to put their resources somewhere else. So I think I said it once to a player who, well, actually, no, I didn't say this to them, but I definitely thought this. I was having a kind of a heated IM exchange with a player during our startup days when we were on Facebook. And he's a very good player. He understood how to play the game very, very well. And he said as much. He said, I've mastered this game. I'm probably the best player of this game there is. And that was sort of in support of, and so, when I tell you, you guys should be doing this, you should be doing that. And
I've encountered a lot of that guy in just forums in the past.
Yeah.
We all know that guy if you're a deep gamer who spends any time reading about games and looking at forums.
Yeah, and that exists. And I understand it. I get it, because as a player, they're right. Like, they can play that game so well. They know all the ins and outs. They know the exploits or the just barely exploits, that kind of thing. But what came to mind when he said that is like, yeah, you're a master of playing the game. And I'm really good at playing the game of running the game. Mm-hmm. Like that's, and it's a different set of skills, and it's a different viewpoint. I'm on a different chair looking at the same map. And so I can sort of see different parts of the terrain that are not shown to the person who's just experiencing it from the sort of the window that we let people see the game from. So, and that's, I don't think that there's any solution to that. The players are going to be frustrated. I've been wildly frustrated at games just well into my career in developing games. And
so you have some empathy and some compassion there too.
Yeah, it tempers my rage from now and then.
Well, Mario, it has been just the deepest pleasure talking to you, as it always is. But thank you for being on the show, and congratulations on your successes.
Well, thank you, sir. I had a great time talking about it too. As you know, there's no lack of interest in me talking about myself. So
well, that makes
giving me this forum.
That clearly makes two of us, because I started a show, right? So peas in a pod.
Oh, yeah. There we go. And what a show it is. I'm always happy to listen to it.
Thank you, sir. Mario told me after that interview that the phone buzzing in the background, you might have heard it, while he was talking about his dad, was in fact his dad calling. How do you like that for a little interview serendipity? I want to thank Mario for the excellent interview, and I really loved this episode a lot. And if you liked what you heard, or loved, whichever, then please go and subscribe. In addition to interviews like these, I also do well-researched shows on a variety of topics, always with a keen eye towards education and, if I'm very lucky, at least a little bit of entertainment as well. My website has all kinds of subscribe links for iTunes, or you can just search on your favorite iDevice. And if that's not your thing, I have RSS feeds. I can be found on Stitcher and a variety of other locales as well. The website's at www.boomno.com. That's BOOMKNOW. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great weekend. Go play some video games, why don't you? And I will see you soon in the future.
Boom knowledge.